Hey guys, Viking Guitar here. We're going to do a very quick little video today, and what this video is going to do is focus on something very specific, which is drum routing in Reaper. Now this can be applied to further routing, but we're going to be using it as a vehicle for talking about drums in particular. I got a question on my Facebook page from a fellow by the name of Heath Smith. It's a nice rhyming name. I like that. And Heath wanted to know. He says he knows how to route drums from EZdrummer to subtracks, so you can have the kick on one, snare on the other, hats, stuff like that. But he didn't know how to, from there, route it to another bus where you could do processing on the entire drum bus or raise, lower the volume of everything at once, that sort of thing. So we're just going to take a look at how I would set up a default EZdrummer template, and hopefully this will answer some questions. Keith, thanks for asking the question, and keep the world metal. All right, so what you see here is the basic Reaper GUI, new project window basically. And all I've done so far is I've added a track onto which I have tossed EZdrummer. I haven't done anything with the mixing or adjusting anything. It's the basic pop rock kit, though that's kind of irrelevant. And the only other thing I've done at this point is add 6 additional tracks. And I've labeled them kick, snare, hats, toms, overhead, and room. And I've labeled the main track here EZdrummer MIDI. So the first thing we want to do, I'm going to backtrack a bit just so we have a complete picture here. First thing we want to do is set EZdrummer. I'm going to turn off my Facebook notifications because that's annoying. I'm going to set my EZdrummer here, so this track where the main plugin is, it's going to be sending audio to these additional tracks. And the easiest way to do that at this point is to click the I/O, drag it to another track, and just tell it that the audio from the send track is going to become stereo audio on this. So right now we're going to have a stereo signal for each track. So 1 and 2 from the host track is going to be the kick, and that becomes left and right on this track. Then we're going to do the same thing to the snare, but we're going to tell it that we want audio for 3 and 4, which is going to be the second set of stereo tracks, from the host track, and then that becomes left and right 1 and 2 on the snare. And we just kind of keep doing that for each one. Every time we go to a new stereo source and just click the next pair. So it's 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6. Then the toms here is going to be 7 and 8. New channel, stereo source, 7 and 8. And the overhead is going to be 9 and 10. And then the last one here, the room, is going to be 11 and 12. Okay, so at this point we're telling it that all the audio on this track is going to go to these different tracks here, and it's going to send a stereo signal to each one. The 2 things we need to do before this part is ready is, first off, go into EZdrummer and tell EZdrummer that we want to send on those tracks. So this is something you kind of sometimes have to intuit between whatever third-party MIDI software you're using and or instrument software, and then what the host is here. For example, in EZdrummer here in the mixer portion, it just refers to track 1. And what track 1 really is a stereo track. So this is really tracks 1 and 2. So this is what's going to the kick here. And then so if we set snare to track 2, this is really the next set, the second group of stereo tracks, which is 3 and 4. And we're going to set this one for the bottom snare mic to the same thing because we want both snares going to the same snare track. At least that's how I'm doing it right now. We're going to set the hat to 3, so that becomes stereo 5 and 6. Goes to stereo 5 and 6 right here, as you can see. 5 and 6, lovely. All the toms are going to be track 4, which is going to become stereo track 7 and 8. Overhead is going to be track 5. Room is going to be track 6. And what we're going to do right now is just insert on the proper track, a quick little MIDI item. There we go. There, that should capture everything. So it's just some stupid little MIDI pattern, but we want to test everything. So what we're going to do is go back to the one other thing we got to do first. Right now, this is sending audio to all these tracks, but this track is also generating audio to the master bus, which we don't want. So go to I/O here, turn off master parent send. That means that this track isn't sending anything to the master. It's just sending to these tracks, and these will go to the master. So we don't end up with a duplicative sound. If this was still turned on, we would have kick sounds coming from here, and that's just not what we want. So we're going to solo each track in turn and just make sure the routing is right. So we're soloing kick, and that sounds like all we're getting is kick. Cool. Now let's do it with the snare. And we're only getting the snare. We're hearing a bit of bleed notes because we have the snare bleed turned on, but that's how it should be working. With the hat, good. With the toms, good. With the overhead, good. And with the room, sounds good. So at this point, if we wanted to adjust any of the individual volumes for the individual instruments or do effects or anything, we could do it on this track or whichever individual track we want to work with. EZdrummer has its own volume adjustments that you can use. At this point, this is most beneficial if we want to adjust something that's more specific than what the track has. Like if we want to adjust the overall snare volume, it's probably easiest to do it here. But if we want to adjust the balance between the top snare mic and the bottom snare mic, you probably want to do it here. Or what you want to do is just have both of those actually go to different tracks over here and do that. We could add compression, do whatever we want with all this stuff, add EQ to each individual kick or drum mic, which is great. But the question that Heath had is, at this point, how do we do stuff that affects the entirety of the drum line? And so here's what I usually do. This is just kind of how I set up my drum bus in general. So what we have is we have our individual instrument mic tracks. And then what we have is the track where EZdrummer is actually housed and where we input all of our MIDI data. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an additional track. I'm going to drag it up to the top. I'm going to label this drum comp for drum compression. I'm going to add another one for drum verb. Put it right there. And then this is just going to be drum mics. I'm going to put this guy right there. And what I'm going to do now is the drum mics track here is going to become a folder track. And so this means that all of the actual mics are going to be housed within it. And if I listen back through this, like, you know, it doesn't affect the routing or anything. So what I can do at this point is I can close that down if I don't want to look at the individual ones. Now we just have the drum, the MIDI information, which is going to all these tracks in a folder. And this is the main one that's actually generating audio at this point. What I'm going to do with this is route this to my drum comp track. And I'm going to put some sort of compressor on this track. I'm not used to this theme. I usually use a different theme, which is why I'm kind of fumbling around a bit. Let's pick the Waves one knob pumper. This is a plugin that was actually, this is not what I want at all. Where is it? Supercharger, that's the one, the Native Instruments Supercharger. This is a kind of fun little compressor. It's not free. Any compressor will do, but this is one that's just super simple to use. So what we're going to do is kind of set up just a compression track for the drums just to blend with the original. So we're going to solo the compression track. We're going to turn off the instrument or the effects for it for a minute and just listen. Okay, so we're getting the audio from the main drum mics folder here. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to turn on the effects so it's just the compressor going, and we're just going to set this to sound really pretty hyper compressed. So that's not a sound we would want by itself. But what we're going to do is unsolo this, and we're going to blend it with the original, because the original is going to sound pretty weak in comparison. And let's just blend this up. Awesome. The other thing we're going to do is we are going to open up the drum mics folder again. We're going to grab the snare, route it to drum verb, and we're going to grab the toms and route that to drum verb too. The snare and toms are something I like to have a little bit of extra verb on. And so we're going to add just whatever verb we want. I'm going to use classic reverb here because I like it, and it's free, and it's pretty damn good reverb plugin actually. So at this point we're going to do the same thing. We're going to set this drum verb to be a sound we like and then blend it with the original. So, and we're going to set the mix all the way up. And then just blend it with the original. So. This is probably hard to hear coming out of my speakers on the webcam mic here, but just take my word for it. So obviously we would be doing much more mixing to this if we were doing it for real. We would probably be EQing and doing other post-processing on at least some of these individual drum mics. But anyway, at this point what we have is we have the main drum audio, which is being triggered by this MIDI line here. Parts of it are going to drum verb, and the whole thing is going to compression, minus the verb. And one thing to mention here also with the drum verb, I'm routing the snare and the toms through here. If you want to have different levels of the snare and tom going in, just open the routing here, and you can adjust the volume coming in from each one of those tracks. I like to keep it as the same reverb because it makes it all sound kind of, you know, together in the same room, and then just adjust the send of each one to that. So now at this point, I will create one final folder, or one final track, which we'll put at the very top. We'll title this Drum Bus. I usually use full caps for my bus folders or tracks just because it helps me look through them if I'm scanning a bunch of stuff. And then what I'm going to do is highlight all of it. This is just icing on the cake. Go down to track color, set tracks to custom color. I always do yellow for drums because why not? And then set this one as a folder track. So now what I can do is I can access the individual drum mics if I need to. I can change the MIDI data, address the verb that I have for the whole drum line, address the compressor I have that's doing the parallel compression. But then at the end of the day, if all this is set and I just want to be adjusting the drums in general or adding a touch of reverb or something to it entirely, I can just put it on this parent folder track here, adjust the volume as I need to, do any individualized effects, and it's real easy to see. One of the nice things about having it this way too, and make sure you close out your folder tracks here, because you don't want those doing the thing, accidentally grabbing other stuff. But oh, that's not what I wanted. I want that, I want that. I told you I'm not used to this thing. But come here, you. There. So if, let's say this was rhythm guitar bus, and this would be, you know, rhythm guitar left and rhythm guitar right, and we would do that, and we would do that. Track is last track and folder, and then maybe set all these to a color. We'll do red because rhythm guitar is fiery. You know, you can see how this kind of starts looking like what you would expect to see in a finished project, you know. And the color coordination and the fact that we have a solid organized folder structure, it makes it really easy when we're going through to just find what we want. It also means that we can have a shitload of tracks in here and still keep it fairly organized where we can see everything on the same screen and not have to be hunting through all this stuff to find where we're going. So that's about it. Obviously, this is a simplified version in terms of the actual amount of mixing that's going to go into it, but hopefully this will give you enough of a setup to, or a foundation rather, to set up your tracks, drums or otherwise, in a way that make sense to you and that are easy to organize and move through as you're working on your project, because you want to be able to be creative and not have to worry about weird little, you know, processes and the actual nuts and bolts of this getting in the way of your creative process. So Heath, that is the answer to your question. Anyone else? I'm sorry this is so long-winded, but I hope it answers maybe some questions you had. And until next time, thanks for watching. Keep the world metal.